Hello and welcome back to AI, the podcast. I'm one of your hosts, David Maples, and I'm joined here with
Virginia Hewling. Hello.
Hey, Virginia. Glad to have you back. It's been a couple of weeks.
Yep, it has been. There's been a lot going on, so this is going to be an interesting episode. How have you been, David?
Yeah, better than I deserve, not as well as I'd like, same kind of thing. This week, we have a kind of a group of articles we're going to go through this week and kind of break them down for you. And I kind of felt like this week, everything was kind of pulling on the same kind of, there's like a through line that we're starting to see in some of these things that are coming out as they get released. Like a few weeks ago, we had the Hugging Face debacle, and then everybody's like, oh, my AI hacked people too. And then this week, it feels like there's a similar kind of thread going through everything.
Yep. It has been an interesting week. This week, we have 6 stories, and the question running through all of them, I think, is one that every business owner is going to have to address and or answer at some point very soon. When AI is doing the work, routing your data and shaping your content and representing your brand, do you actually know what's happening behind the scenes? And can you trust it?
Yeah, and I think kind of where I want to kind of jump in on this is I think most business owners still think of AI kind of like it's just a tool. It's like a fancy calculator or a better spell checker. I mean, obviously
like a data processor.
Yeah, it's a lot more powerful than that. But I want people listening to this episode to start thinking about mind shift. I'm going to be pushing this every episode about how you need to start thinking about these things differently instead of just listening to the numbers and the news. We've gotten some feedback from you guys, and we understand that that is something you'd actually like to see. And I think it's not enough for us to give them tools. It's about we want to shift your thinking. So the mind shift this week is that AI is not simply a tool. It's invisible infrastructure. It's like the electricity, the internet, the plumbing in your house, and it's underneath everything in your business. And the challenge with infrastructure is that you don't think about it until there's a problem. Most of us don't hear and sit and think every day. I mean, maybe people did when electricity was brand new, but you get to it very quick. And then you don't think about like what happens when that goes out. You don't think about the power being a problem until you actually lose it. Or you don't think about water in your house until you've got water in your basement. So today we aren't just looking at the news. We're looking at I guess for lack of a better term, we're looking at the plumbing that's underneath all of this. We're going to change how you look at the vendors you choose, the data that you send to the AI models, and the content that you then publish. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into our first story this week.
Okay. I'm going to grab this one. I thought this was really interesting. And I like teeing these up from the 30,000 foot view down to the nitty gritty of how you're using it individually. So I hope that you're going to see how David and I weave the narrative through this, and kind of give you a better sense of where everything is. So our first segment is it's quite a very large statement. From the 30,000 foot view, the United States has told its partners that they must pick a side. You're either with the United States or you're with China. This was an article that came out a couple of days ago. It's on Reuters. We've got the link in the show notes. The United States is preparing to tell dozens of countries to pick a side. You are either in the American AI coalition or you are in China's. You cannot be in both. The American framework has set up it's something called Pax Silica, which is really interesting. It's almost like Silicon Peace or something like that.
I mean, technically, they set this up like in December of 2025. I mean, it's not brand new, but now we're starting to see it actually kind of get injected into other things.
So we're probably going to be hearing more about this. I like the name. It's cute. But it's really about locking in alliances around these AI models, semiconductors, and those critical rare earth elements that everything runs on.
And that the U.S. doesn't really produce?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about those rare earths. They kind of just show up on the planet where they show up on the planet. China actually launched a competing framework in July, and we have kind of reached the point in the timeline where Washington is drawing a hard line. We have talked in the past about closed frontier models that are being developed in the United States. And then we have also talked about these open source models that are coming out of China. And we have discussed the global implications of what that does to each other's economies and the world and the future in general. This one's a big one. The State Department's draft letter had some interesting language. Reportedly, it says to be a part of everything is to be a part of nothing.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, then what the State Department is saying is that AI is now part of like national strategic infrastructure. Like it's like nukes and missiles and silos and like submarine pins. It's not just software anymore. I do want to point out for the listeners that China holds near monopolies over a lot of the critical AI hardware minerals, like gallium, selenium. There's a whole bunch of these rare earths, as they're called. And the United States used to be the world's one of the world's largest miners of rare earths, I think in the 70s and even in the early 80s. And then it didn't end up being cost effective. By the way, they're critically important. Like you can't make some of these things without it. And China now has like a near monopoly in all these things. And do not be surprised if they don't wield that. Remember, if we can't get chips from China, there's certain things that are made there. It makes things very difficult for us down the road. If we can't get the rare earths, you can't make the chips. And and China has used these materials as leverage in past disputes. So I guess, for lack of a better term, the whatever the rules regarding technology are being actively rewritten.
Well, and this is where we see some of the interesting speculation coming around with Taiwan, right? Because they're one of the only places on the planet that can manufacture some of these. Is that correct?
It's what do you mean? Like as far as manufacturing the chips?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, TSMC is the world's leading fab. I mean, you got SMIC and, Hawaii makes a lot of stuff in China. But yeah, the leading edge chips are the only places they're actually produced right now is in Taiwan. In the U.S., we're building a fab in Arizona. TSMC's building one down there, but it's not even set to come online for a few years now. So, yeah.
Okay. So for business owners, the practical questions that we have with this is, do you know where your AI tools are coming from? Not just the app, but the model underneath it. What's powering it? The chips themselves, the cloud, where is it being hosted? Because all of this exists inside of a much larger geopolitical system that is actively being reorganized and shuffled. And that's got real consequences for selecting vendors and the strategy that you choose for your technology back.
Okay. So my mindset gloss on this, if I'm going to put one of these into this, is that before people were just like, I'm just buying a software subscription. Politics don't really add into my SaaS tools, for lack of a better word.
Well, they never have, really.
So choosing your right AI vendor is no longer just an IT decision. So you're plugging into this geopolitical supply chain, which means the minerals, the chips, the servers, the data servers, where those are powering your marketing or operations. Any of these things could theoretically be cut off by a trade war or a new regulation tomorrow, as we saw with the government telling Anthropic with the Fable and Mythos releases, not to release those. So I guess the question to ask the listeners is, if a new regulation were passed tomorrow, banning the underlying models your favorite application uses, how would that impact your business? What's the risk to you? Would it break your business? I think that's the question we need to basically be taking away from this about what's going on.
Well, I think the takeaway is not to panic, it's to pay attention.
Okay, fair.
I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of discussion post some of these decisions. I think there's going to be a lot of chatter that comes out, and a lot of basically us or them kind of language. I think with a story like this, where you are where a global government is drawing a line in the sand, so to speak, I think they are anticipating more things like this happening as time rolls on.
Oh, absolutely. I think
some of the language is going to get ratcheted up and really start dialing into the big winners of this AI arms race. And right now, as we've kind of been building over the past several weeks, I feel like we're kind of reaching a juncture where this is becoming more obvious to everybody because of these conversations, because of this line drawn in the sand.
I think that so the companies that I'm consulting with dealing with AI, I think most of them are very poorly equipped, even large manufacturers. They haven't thought about this. Nobody thinks about the water getting cut off. The government's not going to step in tomorrow and get the water cut off. But imagine that we have a conversation where, because something's happening and it's a bargaining chip, I come in and say, hey, you can only use power for the next month between the hours of 4 and 8 a.m. And you would just be like, whoa, what is that about? Or nobody's thought about this. I think that the thing that a lot of business owners need to be thinking about right now is, do you have backups? This is why when we're going to talk about some of these routers and aggregators today, those are important. You've got to have backups and plans for this. I think more businesses than ever before are going to have something running on their local silicon, their local servers, et cetera. They're going to have access to something in case something gets cut off. Look, a year ago, I was telling people like, hey, one of these big AI providers probably won't exist at some point. Probably won't exist at some point in the future, et cetera. And I think that as we've seen from the Government Act recently, I think the bigger liabilities are going to be this geopolitical football they're playing. That's just my thoughts on it. I could be wrong in this, but I feel like it's going to change.
What I think is going to be interesting is as this intersects with like Anthropic and OpenAI starting to increase the cost of utilizing their services, you are going to have a natural shift within businesses to maybe access something that's cheaper, which is going to maybe ping some of these open source models from China. And now 6 months later, you've got a tech stack that you've integrated into your business and it's working and flowing and everybody's figured it out and they've adopted it. And then the government comes in and says, well, you can't do this anymore because now you're not back in America and you're just going to have to deal with it. And I don't know that Americans are used to hearing that and being thrilled about hearing that, especially when it means that you might have to suddenly incur a 30% increase in your costs because you're having to switch over to another American-based model. So I don't know. It's kind of, this is just one more of those, hey, look, we turned a corner with this conversation. Where are we going now? The future is a little uncertain. And that's what I mean by don't panic, but pay attention. And like David says, be prepared. If you've got a workflow that's working for your business now, where is it coming from? Is there a risk that it's going to be restricted? That your access is going to be restricted? And then if and when that happens, what are you rolling to next to keep your operations running smoothly?
This brings us right into the next article. And it's kind of a contradiction that exists at the top of all of these things. So the United States government is kind of drawing a hard line around these models. They're saying that you're not going to be able to use certain things. This is being done for some reasons that are rational and other ones that are questionable. Obviously the U.S. firms, Anthropic, OpenAI, would love to see from a regulatory capture standpoint, access these foreign models that are substantially cheaper to be limited. Anthropic's like crying to the high heavens about their distilling or training their models on these frontier models put out by Anthropic in particular. And that saves these Chinese firms a lot of the work that has to be done to get these models doing these things. So one of the big things is there's this concept of routers. I'm going to introduce this because it's in two of our articles. So what routers basically do is it's a third-party intermediary that exists in between what you're building locally and going out there. So instead of getting the model from Claude, Anthropic, DeepSeek, Kimi K2, which Alibaba, whoever, Quinn, there's all these different versions out there. This router sits in the middle, just like your router in your home or at your business, and it routes traffic. So if you have the right, some models are better at financial analysis, for example. Some models are better at creative writing. Some models are better for programming. So you have these routers that sit in the middle layer here. There's a couple of companies. OpenRouter that we'll talk about later is a big one. It's just being bought right now. And what happens is when your machine goes out there and it says, hey, I want to do this, it routes it to where the cheapest model possibly might be to help save you money. Imagine like if you were filling up your car and then you just knew that there was a gas station and gas is so much cheaper and you could do it. It's going to automatically do there. There's usually a markup to what's happening there with these vendors, but there's a new router on the market. And this is why this is important about contradictions. And it's called WorldClaw. Now, WorldClaw actually provides access to roughly 90 AI models. Over half of them are Chinese models, but there's a conflict of interest. It turns out that World Liberty Financial, which is heavily owned by the Trump family, is promoting WorldClaw, and WorldClaw, which makes it a little different from the other models, allows you to buy it with Liberty Coin, the Trump coin, effectively, and for lack of a better term, it's not technically Trump coin, it's Liberty Coin, which is owned by the Trump family. Anyway, and they're collaborating with its Hong Kong platform, which Hong Kong is Chinese. Let's just point that out. These are all companies that the United States government has said, and I quote, they are Chinese militarily aligned. So when I talk about a contradiction right at the top, you've got one thing coming out of the State Department, Defense Department, and then you have the President of the United States at the top. This is me calling balls and strikes. This is definitely you can't use these models, but turns out we have a big business interest of, we're helping pay for these models that are maybe a risk. Anyway, the point about it is, why does it matter? Because it turns out that these routing platforms are more of a black box. You might think you're querying a kind of a neutral AI, but your prompt, your proprietary business information you're putting in there might be routed to a model flagged for national security risks. And you don't actually know who's reading your data when it leaves the aggregator, which this WorldClaw is one, is the front door. So Virginia, what do you think?
The politics of it are interesting. On the one hand, we have the government saying choose the United States or choose China. And we also have the current administration of the same government heavily invested in promoting Chinese models. So,
look,
while the politics are interesting, what we need to take away as business owners is the security piece. The facts of the matter are that experts in this article identified 3 documented risks from using Chinese AI models through these third-party platforms. 1, your data could be collected and monitored by the Chinese government. Your outputs could be censored or altered, and you don't know that, or malicious code could be potentially injected to act through the AI agents on your behalf. And WorldClaw's own website acknowledges that it might share user inputs with the model providers behind the scenes that you would be unaware of.
So something I want to make very clear, and Reuters pointed this out in their reporting. What's being done here is not illegal, okay? But there were 7 experts who told Reuters when they were doing the research for this article that it runs counter to the current U.S. administration's own security stance. So, but this story is really about the AI aggregator platforms. You've got one interface, you've got hundreds of models, and in theory, you've got competitive pricing. The convenience is real, but that convenience often hides complexity. There's a lot of the devil's in the defaults, what's actually there, what's actually being put in there. And especially if you're handling any client information, it's proprietary financial data, anything that's regulated, it's a challenge. And so to Virginia's point, the question you want to ask yourself, listeners, is do you know whose servers your client data actually lands on when you hit generate? And if you don't, it's something you need to think seriously about right now.
And this is the time to ask these questions. It's a new technology still, while we're all learning how to use it. I don't think collectively we as a society have gotten beyond the novelty of being able to use it to start really digging in and asking those questions. For businesses, when your team wants to use a new AI tool, are you asking the questions about where the platform routes requests to? What third-party models are being used? Are we able to control what models are being used? Is our data shared or stored, or is it used for training? Question mark. And if a vendor can't give you straight answers, then that's going to tell you something. Within your own AI use policy, how does your business choose to handle that information?
So this kind of brings us to, we're talking about routers. Do you want to talk about the next one?
Sure. It's another acquisition. Stripe, one of the internet's more used, I think actually at this point, Stripe's got a huge backing. They are a gateway or a credit card processor. They have agreed to buy OpenRouter for more than $7 billion. Why that matters is that now with these hundreds of AI models available, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, dozens of unnamed ones, each has different pricing, each has different performance and different kinds of trade-offs. So managing them all separately is a bit of a headache. So OpenRouter is essentially a switchboard. You plug it in once and you get access to over 500 models, different providers, millions of different users. You're going to have lots and lots and lots of tokens being processed through this. And OpenRouter raised money at a $1.3 billion valuation just 3 months ago. So Stripe is now purchasing them for more than 5 times that amount of money.
Now, Stripe is one of the biggest global processors in the U.S. It processes, I think it's the 4th biggest processor in the U.S. Globally, I think it's number 2 internationally for like e-commerce behind, I think, PayPal. So, I mean, it's huge. So what happened was OpenRouter is one of those other routers. And it basically, when you used it, it would charge a 5.5% markup on any tokens you were buying. So if the tokens, let's say you spent $15 on the tokens that it would route you to for Anthropic, for whatever you're doing, it would charge a 5% markup on that. So instead of paying $15, you'd pay an extra 75 cents per $15 you spent with it, as an example there. And now Stripe is already handling all the credit card processing for them. And then Stripe takes 3%, roughly 2.9% plus so much per transaction or whatever it is. The thing about it that's really interesting is that AI models are becoming commodities. And there's a lot of power that's going to belong in that toll booth, the layer that decides which model gets your prompt that you're sending in and then how much you pay for it. And basically, Stripe's starting to recognize that compute tokens, in a way, are becoming a new kind of global currency, and they want a piece of that action, is what it really comes down to. The challenge I'm running into on here is when a single massive corporation controls both the routing of your AI requests and the billing, whose interests are they optimizing for? The reason you're using OpenRouter is because, in theory, it would route you to the cheapest payment processor for that, et cetera. Now, if you're getting a piece of that action, et cetera, are you going to route your stuff to a more expensive provider because you also get paid on what's being processed as well? You have a conflict of interest here, just like you did in our second article. So it's just, look, I don't feel terrible about this right now, but I do think it's something that business owners should have their eyes open to. That middle layer right now is where a lot of power is getting concentrated right now. Because
it may be like, while we have talked about which model provides the better output depending on what you do, that may not matter in the future. If you got an e-commerce site and you are using Stripe, okay, that's going to manage that credit card transaction. But if you've got your infrastructure set up with that and Stripe is deciding where it's going, it's less about what model you're using and who's providing that model, and more about what happens to your data within that middle layer. And this is where we start getting tricky, because you can't see it. That middle layer is never part of, here's how I'm setting everything up. It's just already provided by the provider between them and access to the models.
I think that ultimately the router layer is, I think it's going to matter for a while, but I think at some point in time, we manage quite a few pieces of software that we have built, et cetera. And we have the option of where you're going to send your things to. But the pricing and change, some of these things change so fast. The idea with open routers, it makes you a little lazy. It takes care of that part for you. I think it's got a lot of utility. I think in the long run, big companies will probably be building their own router layer in the middle there. But then again, some may just use some kind of harness they can just drop in there. So I don't know there. What I am concerned with is that conflict of interest thing. I'm just not sure what's going to happen there. I just have questions about it. So
I'm sure this is not the last time we will be talking about this. I'm willing to say within the next 3 months, I think this will pop up again in a different way, because all of these businesses, like the big guys, Stripe, etc., they're all angling for their foothold in this next evolution of their enterprise.
So I think you need to talk about the article the thing that's been blowing up the internet. What did Anthropic do in the last week?
Well, Anthropic's always, they're just making waves, man. They got to be in the news in new and exciting ways every week. Last week, the story broke that Anthropic is going to add watermarks to their output so that people, humans, anybody will be aware that AI was used in the making of this thing. I think we all saw examples of this in the visual kinds of AI output with Sora. When you could create videos, you had a nice little literal watermark bouncing around the video so that anybody watching the video could see that this was generated with AI. And that is how you know that your cat does not actually sit on your front porch and play the bagpipes. So Anthropic has taken it a step further, and they have incorporated a hidden kind of watermark in all of their products, any text output, Claude code, etc.
It's not actually being put in the code base itself. I've double checked this. It's actually not being put in the code base. You can't actually screw around with code base because those are very technical and finicky.
I thought that too, but I saw on Anthropic that they have said that it's going to be in there. So maybe they haven't worked it in.
No, you cannot screw with the code, but you could embed it into the comments in the code.
Okay. Then that's probably what they're doing with it. Yes. So, as a coder, as a developer, you can add comments within your code itself that the processors don't read, but they're there for the humans to see. The big takeaway is that they're doing this in an endeavor for people to be able to see what is being generated by AI versus what is being created by a human. Except it's not a perfect science, and it doesn't quite work like that. And the internet had a field day complaining about it. Huge businesses have cut off Anthropic. No, people don't like it. Well, it also introduces a lot of questions, because what if you write your own book and you utilize Claude to help you edit it, and then that output is there and it looks like you just used AI to write your book?
I have a problem. I'm actually working on a couple of things right now. One of them is a book, and I'm working on it. And unbeknownst to me, I'm using it for editing. So I have a process here which allows me to copyright. I brainstorm, I do this stuff, then I send some stuff into AI and get his feedback on it. Then I put that back into my feedback loop. I dictate to myself when I'm doing my chapters. I have a whole process for how to do this, and it's very human involved.
Well, guess what? If you use Claude, it's now written by Claude. And Anthropic is doing this because they are trying to work alongside an EU regulation. It is the European Union AI Act requires transparency about AI generated content. But because Anthropic is applying it globally, this is where we're seeing all this fallout.
So just to explain how the watermark works, this is not a watermark in the traditional sense. This is not a watermark that is me putting something in the code base. You can't just strip it out. The way this actually works is when I'm going to try to explain this and break it down. When it writes let's say it writes a chapter of a story for you. It basically does it in such a way that it's predicting the next token that comes in a sentence. So if you said security, it's like Family Feud. The next word it's going to say in the sentence is guard.
Okay, yeah.
Security camera if you'd already prompted it that way. But here's the thing. What it's going to do now, it's going to statistically nudge portions of your output to a different word. So the word is analogous, but it's not it's not the same thing. It's not the same word. So most people would think it was like an invisible mark you wouldn't see. Like it's going to put a mark in there and you could go strip it out or whatever it is. Instead, what it's going to do is it's literally going to change. For example, let's just say you're writing a story and it's going to change the third word in every sentence in the chapter to the letter N, which statistically is impossible. It might be an analogy for whatever you're saying, right? So if you'd said they put the black sign over the door and instead it changed that thing, they put the black mark over the door. And what happens is you go through the entire text and it's like every third word in the fifth sentence and every paragraph begins with the letter M. Statistically, that's not just improbable, that's impossible. It's just not going to happen. So that's what they've done is they're changing what's going on. To a casual reader, the book's going to read fine, the chapter's going to read fine, your social media posts are going to flow naturally. But the original, they are going to generate a detector which to statistically show your stuff and say, no, this Claude code was used on this. Now, Anthropic is saying like, hey, we're not saying that AI wrote this, but we're saying AI was used in the process. So even if you just used it to take the commas out of a chapter or to basically, if I dictate 10 minutes of stuff to it and say, hey, put this in a logical format, put this in bullet points for me. Even if I said, this is bullet point 1, oh, insert that back to bullet point 1, give it to AI for it to do it. It's going to say it was written by AI. And that is a real challenge. And people are kind of revolting. And look, I understand they're complying with the European Union. I've got no thing about this. I've got no anger about this. But it is a bit concerning that this is being done without us having choice on it. Because ultimately, the choice is being taken away from us. But just to let the listeners know, Google's been doing this for a while with Gemini outputs. They've absolutely, it's synth ID.
But then you've got writers and business owners that are having, like you said, real reactions to this. There was a blogger in the article who flat out called this practice unacceptable, arguing that it's, quote, offensive for anything other than a user's needs to factor into what a tool generates for them. And it's a reasonable objection. What was we were talking about last week? The cognitive surrender. Like, is this just enforcing cognitive surrender under the guise of a watermark?
Well, I think there's a few things that are a challenge here. Now, first of all, for those of you using AI, understand that like Anthropic has a constitution behind the AI. You are not answering your questions is not its primary goal. That's why it refuses certain questions. If you say, hey, help me make a bioweapon, it's going to refuse that. The challenge with it is right now, especially as we're seeing with Fable, we have discovered that Fable's basically useless for detecting our own security problems on our own software. Useless because it thinks because we could be using it for something bad, it assumes that and then doesn't give us control over it. So we've already reached a place right now where you don't have a lot of control over there. And I think that is a real challenge for what's going on. The thing is you can already beat these AI detectors in some ways. You could completely retranslate it in a different language and translate it back, but you're going to still lose some of the
utility. They're not foolproof.
Yeah, no, they aren't. They absolutely aren't. But at the same time, what does this mean for what you're doing? And here's the other thing. It's supposed to increase trust. The question is, how can you trust people? How can you trust that I actually wrote anything I said I wrote? That's a real question that right now we have no answers to. And it's attempting to answer these things in a way that complies with the law of the European Union.
Yeah. And you've got the trust factor of it, but it almost feels like it's checking a box rather than solving the problem. And it's creating other issues when, to me, I think of Sam Altman, and when he wants to tout out that we're metering intelligence, and this is something we're all going to have to pull from, and then you put this in the middle of that. Now OpenAI and Anthropic are two different businesses. Anybody who's joining us now and is just discovering all of this wild world of AI, so OpenAI, ChatGPT, as far as I know, is not following this practice yet. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will. I don't know. Strictly speaking, this is with Claude and Anthropic. And we saw this online, actually, over the weekend. The people that have been using Claude are rebelling. They do not like that this change affects the pieces that they can control, especially like when you are using it as simply a tool to modify what you're already doing. David's got another podcast, The Buck Stops Here. And he had an episode, I think it's a couple months ago, where you talked about centaurs and cyborgs. I would encourage you guys to maybe to go listen to that episode. It's really
Nice.
cool because it breaks down how humans can use AI to augment themselves. So we have like the full on cognitive surrender where you're just like, here, write this thing for me and go for it, AI. I'm going to let you do all the work and then I'm going to pretend that I did that. All right. And put my name on it. And then you've got the centaurs, who are human beings that utilize AI more as a blend of what they're already doing. And then you've got the cyborgs, who are human beings using AI to really augment their current skill set. Did I get that right, David?
Yeah, I mean, it's an older idea. It's been around since I think originally BCG, Boston Consulting Group, kind of pinned this to give full credit to them.
Okay.
And an article they put out 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago.
So as human beings, we are learning to use this technology and these tools in certain ways. And I think there are a lot of us that still want that humanity piece where this is what I created and I have used access to something to help me blend it. And this whole watermarking situation really just flips the table on that mentality. I think it's going to be really interesting because it's almost a push-pull, and there's a lot of conflict being built into this. So I don't know how that'll roll out, if Anthropic will stick with it, if they have to stick with it, because it's a European Union regulation. But for businesses, it does have very practical implications. David, you want to run this one down?
I want to run this one to ground. This is actually, I talked about the mindset pieces in this. So the old mindset is like, AI works for me. I'm fine with it. It analyzes my prompt and it gives me the absolute best possible answer, right? Based on the information. Wcool. Totally sounds great. But
help
now
me write a business plan. There you go.
AI now is serving multiple masters, but AI now officially is no longer making choices purely on what's best for your business. It's making compromises in its writing to satisfy compliance and tracking requirements, as Fable won't help me do the things that I'd like to pay it to do. Furthermore, the AI, the era, I don't know if I want to say this officially. I was thinking about it. Like, I was going to say, like, we're rendering a new era where you won't be able to just pass off stuff AI is written as your own.
Not there yet.
That transparency is being hard baked into the output. I don't think the watermarks are the answer necessarily, but we've talked about this for a while. I certainly don't like the idea that statistically you're changing the outputs, so I can't really trust it anymore. You're actually making it less good. Normal people wouldn't notice if you changed the word from gray, the sky being gray, to cloudy. I think that's in the article that you sent me for this one. It's you may say, oh, gray versus cloudy. Those are different in the language, and that language does have a meaning. And I guess the question for the listeners out there is, are you okay with the machine subtly making changes and altering your brand voice just to satisfy a regulatory watermark? Why can't you just say, hey, I totally get this, and I don't understand why this is a problem. I think this is the problem. We're going to run into this muddy place. It always happens in regulation. Regulations overreaches and then comes back. But we do have a lot of problems right now. People are literally putting out whole books that completely are written by AI. There's not a single human thought in those books, an original thought, and people are acting like they wrote those. The other thing about it is any of us putting out stuff that I've been working on this book, which is not related to any of these other things. It's kind of a hobby thing I've been doing as kind of a labor of love for the past 12 weeks. And somebody asked me when I showed somebody a draft, they said, did you write this with AI? And I was like, oh, I used AI in the editing process. He's like, oh, you wrote it with AI. And I was like, no, I literally wanted subject verb agreement.
But perception always overrides truth. And that's the challenge.
Perception becomes the reality. So then at the same time, if somebody's going to think that something I put a lot of time into, I mean, here's the race to the bottom. If you're a writer, why should you bother writing anything if everybody's going to assume you did it with AI? And, it's the AI stuff is not genuinely better overall than the stuff written by human writers right now. There's some cases that are different, but overall, I don't know.
We're also talking about this in the context of this week and what's happening right now. Like all of this exists because this AI consumed human content to begin with in order to exist.
True.
So it's almost like we're building a cage for ourselves. The takeaway also is like, while David and I are grousing about this, deeply existential kind of concept, the practical implication is we're going to have more of this come out, more of these regulations come out, and then we're going to start seeing a whole set of tools that talk about how they can identify if a thing is made with AI or not. And I want you, our audience, to take away and listen that right now, those things, they're not 100%. Okay. So you're going to have a lot of false flags on whether or not this was written by AI. It's going to get really murky and muddy. And for our business owners, again, I can't push this enough. This is what's happening currently. It is your responsibility to stay up to date and try and get ahead of this if at all possible. One thing that you can do is make sure your business has an AI content policy. You as the business owner need to make the rules and make sure your entire team is aware of them about how your business is going to use AI. What's allowed, when human review is required, where human review is baked into it, and whether or not you disclose that AI has been used for your product or services.
There's a lot there. Full disclosure, Virginia does help companies come up with these policies. Please don't use AI to just write this policy. I know a lot of people are doing that right now. We've reviewed
it is far too complex. Yeah.
It's just, I'm not even gonna say it's a good place to start. We've reviewed some of these that AI wrote for people, and you can drive a truck through them. They don't have context to the questions that need to be asked. Now, as humans, we could make that stuff better, possibly, but they don't understand some of the problems in the business. And I think it's the same problem we talked about in a few previous episodes. People, when they get the answer from AI, they assume it's right. And a lot of times it just doesn't have the context. We talked about a couple of different things. So one of these companies is, this is all about trust in synthetic media. So the last two, it's really about what's the value of a human. So an AI news site actually scooped journalists, and there's a new 24-hour synthetic AI news channel that's been running deepfake actors and, like unapproved AI guests. So the first one is the actual Hugging Face article was actually, there's a place called a Runtime Wire, okay? And it is a complete AI news channel. It's an AI assisted publication. We cited it for the Stripe story in particular today because it's been beating some major tech outlets, including Wired, on a significant story about the Hugging Face hack. So we talked about Hugging Face, OpenAI stuff, got out and hacked Hugging Face. The AI thing spotted a QR code on X. It captured a live conference transcript, processed it, drafted a story, and published it before the larger human-led outlets. And the article that Gizmodo wrote about this is not that the story was wrong. It was fast and accurate, but it was also pretty, like if you go read it, it's really, really boring. It's flat. It was a play-by-play. It had no real context, no depth, no judgment about why even it mattered, but it's, and Gizmodo officially called it informational fast food.
Okay. And then I've got Mirage AI, covered by MSN. Mirage AI spent $50,000 running a 24-hour AI news generated channel on X as an experiment. 4 AI anchors with names like Tom Callahan and Marcus Sterling were delivering real Reuters wire stories. They had AI generated commercials, they had AI guests, and the company was transparent throughout that this was AI. And there were graphics on the screen everywhere indicating so, but it still reached 50,000 viewers. And it also made errors, including misidentifying a woman in a news package as President Trump.
Okay, so look, for those who listen to the show, the data is pretty clear on where the public stands. According to Gallup, like 7% of Americans rely on AI for news in any meaningful way. And basically, 40% of Americans say AI use would basically erode trust in the news organizations, which already is not at a great level right now. They basically said that any professional communication hinges on a promise that a human stands behind a story, that there's real judgment. Everything we say on this podcast, we have to stand behind, like what we're saying. And people can often sense if something's missing, even when I guess that if it appears polished, you might overlook some of those things. But the reality is, when we're talking to you right now, I hope you understand this is really what we think about things.
I don't like it. I think, again, it's like it's going to be so fast at some point. It's just going to outpace humans. In microseconds, it can read and capture and copy and then flip around and then output what takes a human process much longer to create depth and context and fact checking and being able to be an experienced storyteller of sorts. But we have also seen over the past several years, even online news articles have the TLDR up at the top. It's just like bullet points of what your summary is. Like less and less is being delivered faster and faster. So how traditional media outlets are struggling to keep up with, where people are getting their news now. Their newspapers are selling less, magazines are selling less because the consumption habits have changed from humans. So it's a new breaking story now, but at some point you can kind of see a 24/7 AI generated channel existing. I think you're going to have AI channels doing all kinds of entertainment because there are people who sit at home and watch entertainment all day, and they're always looking for something new to consume. So, as this applies to your business, almost every company now is some form of a media company. We all put out content. We're all putting out socials. We put out blogs. We put out PR articles, client communications, thought leadership, website content, all of that stuff. But the cost of producing something that looks credible is dropping. It is getting cheaper and cheaper. And like I said, faster and faster. So actual credibility that's built on expertise or experience or accountability or just straight up human judgment is, I hope, going to become more valuable, not less. We'll see.
I want to hit up with the mindset thing. So the way the mindset kind of on this worked before was, oh my God, AI can write on my newsletters. I hate doing that, or my blogs or my social media posts. Anything you hate writing, you're like, AI can use it for that.
Well, that's why, and that's why you see all this in social media now. It's all the slop. Everyone hates social media.
We work in marketing and advertising. The reality of it is, some of that marketing advertising stuff, it's like, AI can produce stuff that's it's close to being what you put out there, but it's not necessarily as good, et cetera. And then they say, look, it looks just as professional and it's free. I think there's going to be a paradigm shift from polish to kind of proving that you're human. Look, social media has become the worst. Like, think about influencing as a whole. No offense to you influencers out there if you're listening, but influencing is the worst kind of slop. It's always been that way for some kind of level. There are influencers who do really good stuff, but a lot of it's just, even right now, it's like, if you want to do what works on Instagram, copy what's working for somebody else. That's always been a thing, but God, how pedantic and boring is that? Like, it's a race to the bottom. It's like, oh, don't come up with anything new yourself. Don't add anything new to the content or context. Just copy what someone else has done. Look, it's a valid business strategy. It is informational, for lack of a better term, fast food. It's creating a food desert with content, or a content desert. So my question is, what's actually becoming valuable? We're not perfect when we talk on this podcast. We make mistakes. We have flaws. We have opinions. We have unique experiences, hopefully hard won, but through years of learned it in the streets. Your account,
I paid for this experience.
I paid for that. I've got the scars. I got the scars to prove it. But then again, just might be the old man yelling at a cloud too. The reality of it is that credibility is probably the only differentiator left when content costs you nothing to make. By the way, I think if your content costs you nothing to make, it probably has no value. Because if the cost was zero, then what did you really say? You were just regurgitating. They could have just gotten a machine to tell them the same question or tell them the same answer. So here's my question. If your content's indistinguishable from a bot, why should a customer trust you with their money? If you are putting out something. People will still watch human beings play baseball games. We will still watch actors on stage because that's interesting. Don't get me wrong, BattleBots is fun. I love seeing the bots go off and fight their things, but you don't give a damn about them. You care about the humans who are running those machines. You care about that high school team that put this together and they're 17 in their plucky garage because they didn't have the money to buy servo actuator motors. That's what you give a damn about. It's about being human. I'm in it for the people. I'm human. I hope to remain human, but ultimately, I think at the end of the day, we need to be in there for the people. You're putting out AI slop or AI garbage. Why should I give you my hard-fought won money? Why would you trust me with it? So I want to kind of bring this to a close. So today we covered models are being hidden behind aggregators. I don't think they're being hidden intentionally, but they are hidden. The fact is it's creating opacity. You don't always know what's been going on. We talked about infrastructure at the beginning of this episode. This is the equivalent of all the plumbing is now in the walls and we're putting sheetrock up. You don't know what's back there. How about that?
Yeah. No, until there's a leak and then all your sheetrock is covered in water and falling apart and you have to hang drywall. If you guys have ever had to hang drywall, it kind of sucks.
And the lead in your pipes doesn't show up until your kids start going deaf.
Ooh, so okay, you're going to really double down on this metaphor. All right.
I don't know. It's the problem with it, right? It's like you don't know if you're not testing at the source. It's a challenge. Those are real problems. But in a world where everything can be automated, I guess automated, faked, or routed somewhere else without your knowledge, I think trust and transparency are your ultimate competitive advantages. I think this is also going to be more difficult for people because it turns out that not just the Gen Zs, but the alphas, they don't trust anything to be real. So how are we going to win back their trust? Because we've betrayed them with that for so long. They're used to being taken advantage of. They assume it's not free and it's not valuable. And they will be the consumers very, very soon you're going to have to sell to. So I think you're going to have to start thinking differently about all these things starting now. I mean, that's what my purpose with my goal on this podcast is to kind of give you new paradigm shifts. I want this to tickle your brain a little bit. And when you get off the pod to think about these big questions, start looking under the hood of your car, start asking questions about the stack. Ask your vendors what's running behind the scenes. Like what's running this machine? AI watermarking's here. That's already happening behind you. So you're going to have to build your content strategy, assuming that your clients will know at some point that AI helped write it. This may mean that you might want to look back at having humans write some stuff again, or maybe use AI to give you a first draft and then have humans go rewrite it. Like make it better. I'm trying to do that with the book thing right now, and I think it's a real thing. Find the thing that makes your human-generated content actually valuable. So find out where human judgment's like freaking valuable in your organization. Like where is it required and not negotiable? It needs to be there. Man, I'm really getting on a soapbox about this.
You are. But you know what? Like, yeah. For the writers and the journalists,
journalism in America is supposed to be the fourth estate. It's supposed to one thing that separates a lot of stuff that happens from tyranny. It's how do you hold those people accountable? I don't trust the machines in the hands of other people to make those decisions for us. I think those things are incredibly important. I think in anything where actual human judgment is required, it's not just required, it's absolutely essential and it's necessary. And you should fiercely protect that from automation.
Because and I'm gonna grab that point and move this one forward, because you don't know who is controlling the infrastructure. We saw this in every article we've talked about. We're going to see this moving forward. Who is in charge of it? Who controls the routing? Who controls the content? Who owns it? And whether or not any of this is actually being held accountable by a human being. Like, guys, y'all remember WALL-E, okay? We were the joke in WALL-E.
Yeah.
We don't want to be that. When you surrender these kinds of things, you're setting yourself up to just be a leaf on top of water. You're going to go wherever it takes you and you don't have any control. So David wanted to add more of the mindset change into this episode. And I think we're going to try and continue to do that moving forward. So like he said, these are some big questions. As business owners, as fellow humans on this rock in the middle of space that we all share, I hope that these are conversations that we can start to have more frequently and explore where we want this to go. Because if we don't say what we want and act on how we want it, it is going to be delivered to us in the form of pipes already behind a wall in a house that you walk into, and you don't know who's calling the shots.
Just remember, I don't want this to get twisted. AI can definitely be useful. I'm helping large corporations right now, even some mid-sized ones, do some stuff. I'm doing some national work right now and going in and looking at like how we can improve processes. And one of the things I'm always doing is they keep asking automation questions, like how do you automate this? And I was like, this is where human judgment makes a difference in an I-beam falling off a ledge and crushing people to death, or not. And it's in your files now, and you're being known. Like safety, you can't negotiate that piece away. So, but the decisions about what to trust, how you're going to show up, how you're going to represent yourself, and what you give a darn about at the end of the day, those are your decisions to make. They're very important, and don't delegate that to a machine. You're going to need to make these decisions, and my bet on this is that eventually those decisions are going to matter more, not less, as this technology gets much, much more capable. I do want to do a plug for something on the buck stops here. We didn't talk about this today, but there's a video that OpenAI put out about the Hugging Face hack. And it's caused me to reevaluate everything I think about the challenges or potential dangers of AI and cybersecurity in particular. We'll put a link to that. I'll be recording that show later this week. I think it's important, and I'm going to try to drill this down and make it addressable and understandable. I'm not trying to scare the heck out of everybody with it, but if you understand the context on this, I think it's already later than you think. There's not a ton of time in your business to start putting these security pieces in place and putting plans of action in there. When I say it's later than you think, it's not midnight yet, but it's 11 o'clock. And a lot of people, they think, hey, they have years to do this. And I'm telling you, you have months to do this. And I think that's going to be very important. It's not to scare people. I want to make it accessible in a way that small businesses can walk away with 2 or 3 things they need to know. And medium to large business, I mean, heck, maybe they'll call me and hire me from it. But I think it's important for you to know those things. And I'll be putting that stuff here. So that's my plug for the buck stops here.
Okay. And that's what this show, the AI the podcast, is about. We could deep dive all day long into technology and what it's doing and the models and blah, blah, blah. But it's not about that. It's about the judgment, because it's, again, us as human beings, we're the ones who have to live in this world. And if you heard something that maybe got you thinking, then the best thing you could do, in our opinion and our ask, is to share this episode with somebody. Share it with just one person. Somebody trying to make sense of this, a colleague, a fellow business owner, because that is how we all grow, and that is how these conversations will continue.
So if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Everything we discussed in the show, all the articles today, are linked in the show notes, so go read them for yourself, see what you think, and reach out if you want to push back on anything we said. We really mean that. So until next week, go out there, do something worth doing, or write something worth reading. Make a difference. We mean that.
Take care of each other.
See y'all later.
Bye, guys. Have a great week. That's a wrap for this episode of AI the Podcast. To make sure you never miss an update on the future of tech and business, hit that like and subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. This show is made possible by the support of listeners like you. So if you want to help us grow this community, drop us a 5-star rating. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.